Well, welcome everyone to Essence for Style, devoted to sensual and spare decorating, which is one of the chapters that we explore in our book. And I can't think of anybody who could speak more eloquently to the topic than Veere Grenney, who we're very lucky to have with us today. So I just wanted to tell you a funny story before we bring Veere on. But about 11 years ago, I was renovating my house. And I came upon a story in Australian Vogue Living and my jaw dropped. I just could not believe how beautiful this interior was. And I carried it around with me for months and months and months as I went to pick out marble and paint and hardware. And it was really the inspiration for the house that I live in now. And then fast forward 6 months later, I was named the editor-in-chief of Veranda magazine. And I was meeting with Elizabeth Blitzer, who's a wonderful public relations person, and she was talking about her new client who lives in the UK named Veere Grenney. And she pulled out these images of this project, and lo and behold, it was the exact same images that I had been carrying around for the last 6 months. So it was kismet. I have been a fan of Veere since before I knew him, and I feel incredibly lucky to have him with us today, to be able to carry his collection of fabrics and wall coverings at Schumacher. And Veere, welcome. You're here all the way from the UK. It's 9 o'clock at night, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you for recognizing that. Not that I mind working at night, but it is, I haven't had a drink yet because I'll have a drink afterwards, but it was, it's lovely, it's an honor to be. So thank you very much for asking me. I'm thrilled.
We're so happy to have you here, so thank you.
Good.
So tell us a little bit about your background, how you got your start, and how you got to where you are today.
Well, thanks, Dara. I think we all have our stories. We all have and a lot of people may know my story. I published a book 18 months ago, and obviously that has an element of it. But I'm from New Zealand, and when I was growing up in New Zealand, it was in the 60s, and it wasn't really a place where people explored decoration. There was a mode of decoration, but it wasn't a subject people ever talked about. They did architecture, but not interior design. I became obsessed about interior design when I was at school. And I became obsessed about people like David Hicks, because he's young and cool and trendy and these amazing colors. And Billy Baldwin was probably the ultimate, because from New Zealand, we got more American magazines than we did English magazines. But I loved England, but I mean, American was my probably first dip into it. And all the wonderful House Beautiful magazines used to have insides, the floor plans of houses, etc., and lovely suburban houses. And New Zealand's a suburban country as well. So cut to the chase, I then, after university, I always wanted to do interior decoration, but it wasn't something that you could even knew the path to do in New Zealand. So I then spent many years in my youthful life traveling and having a slightly hippie life and exploring many different facets of myself and the world, which was a great privilege. Because remember, in the days of the early 70s, the world was still essentially agricultural. So travel, there were very few people traveling, and it was a wonderful time to explore the world in its maybe an incarnation that we'll never see again. So that was wonderful. And if you think of going through the Middle East and India and Afghanistan and Iran and Turkey, all those countries with virtually no borders in a way. I mean, there were borders, but there was no strife. I then in England really wanted to do what I did, but it takes quite a few years to do that. So I worked in the antique world, which was my desire at the time. And then I got to know some of the really great decorators like David Hicks, who'd be my hero, or Colfax and Fowler, or all the greats in London in the 70s, which was still a tiny world of decoration. And then eventually I went to work at the age of 30 with David Hicks and Mary Fox Linton, and then I started my career. So for anyone that's listening that maybe is worried about, not really having a career in their 20s and what are they going to do, I can promise you I didn't start till I was about 31 years old in a grown-up life where I actually had a paycheck and I got up and was in the office at 8 o'clock and left at 7 o'clock. That sort of thing. So, I was a long way behind everybody else. So I was a late starter, but so never despair if that's what you want to do.
That's an amazing experience.
Well, I
So,
think it is, yeah.
yeah. So what was it like knowing David Hicks? I mean,
Well, it was interesting because I suppose one of the things I think, Dara, you're probably even experiencing yourself a bit too now when you get to a certain age. When you're young, there's people you really admire who are mentors or people you really admire. And then when you meet them, you realize that people are just like you. And then you realize that well, it takes a long time to realize you do have something to offer. Even in youth, you have a new enthusiasm and a new understanding or a new perception of something. That's why I love young people in my office. That's why creatively, I know in shoemaking, you have young people around you. They can often frustrate you because maybe their work ethic isn't quite like yours, but they bring something new to the table. And that's really exciting. So with Hicks, like Colfax and Fowler, they taught me the discipline of tailoring, or the many, many great disciplines which hold me in great stead. And I'll be forever thankful for that. But once you get your head, or once you're trusted, or once you're allowed, you take what they offer, and then you add what you are, which is relevant to the world at that moment. Right. So a young man of 35 working for a young couple, which I may have been doing, I'm relating to their world as opposed to a world which maybe is distant to them, or the world of their parents or grandparents. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing about youth. That's a good thing about youth in our offices. You wrap up your interpretation, Dara, of things. When I worked at Colfax and Fowler, you have this marvelous tradition of tailoring. It's like going to a couture shop. It's like working for one of the great French couturiers or American couturiers in the fashion business. And so you learn the art of tailoring and rules that they impose, and then you may break the rules or you may bend the rules, and you make it your own and you make it relevant to the time you're in. And that's why one should never, ever think that what one has to offer is not worth considering. So when you asked if you're a young designer, and I know so many young designers buy your fabrics, and that's always exciting for me. So when I'm working with Shoemaker and I'm looking at the fabrics of mine or wallpapers that are selling, it's great when it's my peers and you think, well, it's very nice of them. Like I buy their fabrics with Michael Smith. I buy Michael's fabrics, or Martin Luan Bullard's fabrics. And when they buy mine, I'm excited too. But then it's very nice when you suddenly see young people buying your fabrics because they see something in it which isn't just about your name.
Right, and using something maybe in a way that you never imagined they would.
I never imagined it. I mean, that's what I know. When you and I are designing fabrics and collections together, or when you're taking my collection, you always bring that up. It's like someone else. Like last year, Dara and I were in Los Angeles, and we were both promoting a new collection I'd just done with Shoemaker, which was a chintz plus some rather interesting geometry and Islamic patterns, which in fact drew inspiration from my house in Morocco, with a wonderful, beautiful archive chintz from Shoemaker recolored. And Dara, very cleverly, in one of the design houses, got a young couple to use the fabrics in a way they'd use it. Well, they used it in a way that I would never use, and the colors they used I'd never use, but it was sensational. And that's very exciting to see. That was their take on what they thought Veere Grenney would do, which isn't, but boy, it's good competition. And they used it beautifully. So that's what is quite nice when you get older, that you don't ever think that your ideas are fixed in stone. There's always going to be someone that's going to come along and kick you and say, why don't you try this way? And sometimes it really does work. And in the case of the collection that we did last year, Dara, that just looks sensational, absolutely sensational.
So that collection.
And yet you see in that collection, in the collection of these fabrics that we did last year, there's a wonderful, one of the floral chintz, and we did it in a colorway that's very similar to the pine hollyhock that Dara does at Shoemaker. And I've just done an entire room in it and the curtains, and it's a ballroom. It's enormous. Well, it's sensational. I mean,
when did we get to see that? That sounds.
Well, I know. I've got to put my knee on the neck of the client to allow us to, but it is sensational. And yet, you know, to use so much of it, hundreds of meters of it, all over the walls and the curtains, it's a work of art.
It sounds so beautiful.
So, but I do that because I've had more experience maybe than someone who was, you know, 31 or something.
Yeah.
You know? So we all move
Have
it.
to publish it in our next bulletin. And I just want to tell everybody, because you know, a lot of people don't know that in the bulletin, the interiors that we shoot don't always have to have Schumacher in them. So that is not a criteria for publishing something. But that's my own little plug.
But also my little plug is that, you know, because our fabrics are the Schumacher, we always love to have a little bit of it in it. It might not be the whole room, it might just be a pillow, or it might just be a small chair or whatever. But that doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is mixing it usually proves to us, in fact, that, you know, it can work anywhere. So that's what we try.
But I have a hunch, Veere. So the room is covered completely in the Betty chintz, right? Yep. The walls and the curtains.
Yep.
I bet there's still a cleanness to it. Am I right?
Yes, there is. I think when we talked about this earlier, and we're talking about having a clean room, and you suggested, look, it's by saying clean, it's not cold, it's not sanitized. And I think for all of us, and people that might look at my book and know my work, and that can be Dara, it can be anyone that knows what I do. I can't tell you what I do, but then there must be something in my work that people recognize which pervades all of it. And I think the thing that does pervade all of it is order. And I can't help myself. I don't mean control, I mean just order. And what is very interesting, and I have this as a test in my office, people that come to work for me, if we're doing an installation, and say you're putting a lamp on a table, or the way you place a table next to a chair, or the way, although you have a floor plan that you're working to, the way you place things and their space from each other. That is a work of the highest geometry. I know it sounds weird, but it is. And that's what gives something order. And it's difficult to describe to people, but if you look, what is really important for young designers or people that love our business is to study a room and just see the way it sits furniture-wise. And that usually is in order. And
Right.
it's precise.
Right, there's a balance, right? Like if you
balance. It's complete balance. It's like balance, you know, and you know, you know, when you see a very lovely big sofa and then you have a chair sitting at right angles to it, and it could be a chair that's light to move, or it could be a heavy chair. If it's a heavy chair, it'll usually be at perfect right angle. If it's a light chair, it'll be moved in a certain way that makes it almost like a work of art that can be moved around and played with. And this is what I've noticed more and more. And so when I have a young assistant who's worked with me installing, I really watched just to see the way they place, because that is very much, I think you could argue, is maybe the Veere Grenney look. Maybe you can define it better than me because you know me very well and you know my work very well. And as an editor of a magazine, you learn to recognize the designers you reckoned on and the ones you thought maybe didn't have it, whatever it is. And I think probably it's that order, and that order looks neat and tidy.
Right.
And you somehow always begin from a tidy concept, then you can be as untidy as you like.
But it's also about composition. I was watching, I'm addicted to old movies, and I was watching The Grapes of Wrath recently, and the director, I think it's Ford, was interviewed, and he said, you know, I'm really not a genius, but I've always been incredibly good at composition. And I watched the movie for the first time after hearing that, you know, again, after hearing that, and I was so struck by the composition. And it is about balance. It's not different than a room. It's exactly what you're saying. It's like everything has a purpose and a reason and in a way, a tidiness, you know, like.
It is and you understand why actors and actresses, ego being one thing, were really upset when often the shot they're in fact, they're in a process by which just doesn't reveal them well. You know what I mean? Because everything is revealed when it comes into a balanced order. And you want to reveal everything in its best manner. And I've only just realized this, by the way. It's not something which I've ever thought that's how you begin interior design. But when I look at my rooms, and then with Hicks, I know with Hicks what I did. when you're brought up in a suburban house, you suddenly see maybe bigger rooms or, I don't know, better put together rooms. It was always about where things sat. Now, as a designer, I discovered working with him that his fault, which I will always say is his fault, is he never understood quality. So everything he did looked great, but it didn't last. You know, that he didn't care about the inside of a sofa or the way it was made or anything. He just cared about the look, which it's got a purpose too. So he was a master at positioning, as you say, in composition. Mm-hmm. And that's when you, like Saint Laurent, his compositions were wonderful in fashion. That's when you could put shocking pink, aubergine, and yellow all within the same few inches. And that's a harmony in itself.
Yeah.
And that's a great composition.
Yeah.
You know.
So one of the rooms, I don't think we have a photograph of it today, but it's your bedroom that I photographed. It's the bedroom in London previous to this. Sure. And you had in there, so you had a beautiful canopy bed. I think you had some Georgian pieces. You had a slip-covered chair and a beautiful chintz. And then you had some very beautiful modern pieces. You know, you had, well, you have to refresh my memory. Maybe John.
Well, I had pieces, a Knoll coffee table, for example. I had a Bugatti table. I had a wonderful bureau plat, which was made by Billy Baldwin in the 60s by Maison Janssen. I had pieces of lacquer furniture, contemporary. I had some 60s pieces. I had some pieces I designed. I had an extraordinary, weird 50s chair from Los Angeles that looked like a Studebaker car. You know, it was, and then I had a very modern light in the middle of the room that you would expect to see in a Van Day True room, but in fact it was next to an armchair that your grandmother would have had because it was big and deep and covered in chintz. So
and it had a pleated ruffle slip cover, I remember.
It had a slip cover, and then also to make it even more authentic, I put a box pleated skirt on it, and I had it slightly off the floor like it had shrunk from many washes, like you used to
I remember.
So it was.
How does all that work together? Like, what's the magic?
Oh, I don't know. I think the magic of all that really is the more you know about decoration and things, the more you can play, don't you? You know, like, well, first of all, there's nothing greater in the world for us lot, for the decorators, really, than creating an amazing canopy bed. Now, the great thing about a canopy bed really is that most people love them and most people only imagine them for going on holiday or going to a wonderful hotel or somewhere. But the great thing about a canopy bed, if it is quite modest and not huge, I love sleeping in them because somehow they envelop you. And there's a quality which almost everybody will tell you when they sleep in them enough, they wouldn't want anything else. Maybe it's to do with being cozy. Maybe we've discovered in our work, whenever we can, and Dara's got a photograph of something here, which she'll show you later on. If you ever make a bed in a nook, it reminds you of being a child when we used to make huts under the dining room table and put a blanket over it. Right. You know, as children on a wet afternoon in the holidays, Mum would come in and the dining room table would have a cover over it, would be hiding underneath it. And even today, for you know, in the particular house where we'll show you this, for an extraordinarily successful man, it's his dressing room, and in his dressing room he has this nook bed, which is quite deep, in fact. So when he gets home late, or when he wants to be, his wife is ill, or he's ill, or something, or whatever, or they've had a row, he sleeps in this room. And everybody we do it for, that we give a nook for, if it's a 12-year-old girl or boy, or if it's an adult, they all adore it. And when you post a picture of a nook bed, you get thousands of Instagram likes immediately. So we all relate to it. It's like something innate within us about being cozy, warm, protected.
It's like going back to the womb, maybe.
It is. It's womb-like. It's really womb-like. Yeah. And I think all of us have a slight fantasy about it. And I don't like if it's frilly or too much, but I love it. Mark Sykes, who you talked about earlier, he's quite a master at it too.
Yeah.
And so often we're building a house for some very, very nice people in America at the moment. And one of the first things, and I've got two little girls, and one of the first thing the client said to Natasha and I and the architect, I'd love it if my girls could have nook beds. You know, so she's already thinking that as young women, as little girls and as young women, it's always a very lovely thing to have.
Okay, well, that is, I mean, I think that's so interesting and so inspiring, actually. You know, it's not something that's usually put into words. So I really, you're so articulate, Veere. I really.
Well, but I think also, Dara, what's happened, I think, in our world too, which may even be more now. Natasha and I, and Natasha is the director I work with in the company, and we do everything together, is that bedrooms, I think, can be such wonderful rooms. And the funny way in the decorating world, they're almost second best. And they always just a bed with a headboard and two bedside tables and two lamps. You know, it was convention always, every hotel. Okay, all of us been to hotels. Every hotel looks the same. And the cheaper the hotel, the more it looks like every other hotel. But suddenly you're realizing that actually you can bend that envelope. You can make it exciting. It can be different.
Yeah.
And it can be, as you say, room-like, cozy, a refuge, beautiful. And one of the things about lockdown, which I have adored from working from home, and I don't know if you had this, Dara, too, every day our office opened from wherever we were, I was in the country and the girls or the boys were in the city in their own houses, is that we didn't open the office till later in the morning, because some of the girls had homeschooling for their children they had to do first. So we didn't open maybe till 11 or 12. Well, I just adored being in bed for an extra hour or two every morning. I'd never done this. And I just loved waking up, listening to the news, pottering around, going back to bed with a cup of tea, doing some notes, checking my Instagram. And suddenly you thought, 2 hours in bed before you tackle the day is bliss.
Yeah, it probably really gets you ready to be more productive.
Well, I think it does, but none of us are used to it, because you're running off the city at 7 o'clock in the morning or something, rather to be there, or whatever it is, or I'm doing the same thing, or we're at the gym, or doing whatever else we do. But suddenly spending 2 hours getting ready in bed is a great feeling. I don't know how many other people experience the same thing.
Well, to relating to canopy beds, I mean, you do a lot of upholstered walls also. Is that the same kind of idea where it's cocooning and?
Yes. What was interesting, when I first came into the world of decoration, and you learnt your art and you discovered what was attractive, up until, I would say, 20 years ago, almost all rooms that were upholstered above a chair rail. And it's a traditional way of showing off wealth in the 18th and 19th century. So like all the lovely federal houses in America, once you got a little bit rich, you put a damask above a chair rail. Before that, you probably just painted it. And the paneling underneath meant that furniture could hit the chair rail, but it wouldn't damage the upholstery. So that's the old tradition of upholstered walls. What we've been doing for the last 25 years, I've been doing, especially in the city, is upholstering the wall. And we do it without any braids or anything. So in other words, it's seamless. So it is, when you first walk in, it's a pink room or a yellow room or green room or whatever, if the walls are plain. And then suddenly you realize there is a different atmosphere in the room. There's a feeling of being slightly cocooned. There's a feeling of order. We use that word again. There's a feeling of cleanness. In other words, the edges look clean. There's no dirty areas. And you often wonder, what is this? Then you touch the wall and it's spongy. And then also when you talk, your voice is softer. And all those things make a sensual place. And when you're doing a beautiful room for people, so often it's the things of which they're unconscious that makes the room particularly nice.
Right.
And often they're unconscious of it. So a friend of someone we've just done a wonderful house for in London, really lovely people. I remember her saying to me that she came to me because it probably was in the mid-90s, even the early 90s. She went with her husband, who was in the banking world. She went to a party, a garden party in an English house in the country for a very young couple. who were then in their 30s. And she went into their living room, where it was all outside, it was a summer's day, but she went into the house to use the bathroom, and her hostess said, please look around if you like. So like all of us, that's all we ever want to hear from someone is look around my house by yourself and do whatever you like. She went into their living room, and the living room, this was in about 1993 or 4, it must have been, or a little bit later. The living room was upholstered in pale pink fabric, but she thought it was paint. And she touched the walls and they were spongy. And she said she's never been so in love with a room in her life. It also had lovely black and white pictures on the wall. But she said it was just so extraordinary, this pale pink. And the room had a hallowed atmosphere. So cut to the chase, 20 odd years later, she contacts me and she said, I'll never forget that room. It had a huge effect. So she said to me the other day that as the house is being used by friends, especially the family during lockdown, her close family who would be allowed to visit, she said, so they all go on about the atmosphere, and only after a while do they realize the rooms they love are upholstered rooms, because all the rooms are, well, not all, but the rooms that are upholstered, it's a plain material. Mm-hmm. And she said, it's extraordinary, and people often don't know why they like the room so much, but they love it for this indefinable feeling of being secure, this feeling of maybe warmth, or this feeling of order, as we say, or this feeling of acoustics, and the way you communicate in the room feels very different. And that's one of the reasons why I often do it, Dara. We can do it, which you'll see in some of these pictures, with amazing upholstery, which can be wonderful if that's the atmosphere you want. But I mean, for example, we've often talked about this within your own company and with us. Planes are wonderful, and every plane that I design or have a part of, I bear this in mind. That it's not expensive particularly, it's a cotton or a linen, but the difference between that and wallpaper, if you need that atmosphere, is paramount.
That's fascinating. And do you ever do paper-backed fabrics?
Yes, well, we do. Funny enough, we do that, and because I love that too. It's a step down, but even that helps. We all buy often paperback linens now and things like that, and that's what when you put that on the wall, it's most successful when it's a pattern or whether it's textured. Because when you paper the walls in like quite a textured linen, that three-dimensional quality helps enormously. Often it's not so necessary in an upholstered wall, but it's very good as a wall covering. And I've noticed that you and lots of other people more and more are doing like a lovely linen that comes paperback. Right. So you can do it.
We'll also paperback any fabric that anybody, we'll do it for the
all the work we do in America. The only people we know that do that are you, and we love it because it says, I'll have 50 meters of that fabric, thank you very much. And it's like saying, do you want a gift wrap? No, I want a paperback. You tick a box. Well, I mean,
you on every single one of my seminars.
And what's so brilliant, Dara, it's no hassle for me. I mean, it's just tick the box and you've got a paperback. And so, paperback fabrics are really wonderful, and we use them all the time. And remember the other thing, Dara, too, about upholstered walls and paperback fabric is, if you don't have a lot of art, it's not so necessary to begin with. You can then acquire it, because people have their own ideas. So some people are very lucky to have it, some people aren't. But if you're, I think it's money very well spent in the decorating world. I really do. And it's something, if I'm doing an upholstered living room or something, if someone wants to cut or doesn't want to spend the money, I'll usually work pretty hard to persuade them. And they've never been disappointed.
I'm going to go upholster all my walls now.
Someone once said to me, it's like a padded cell. I said, well, it's not a padded cell. It's actually not that, but it is something that gives a serene feeling.
Well, I revere everything you say, so I'm on it.
Well, right. Other people do.
So we have some slides to show today, and some of the rooms I hadn't seen before. So I wanted to make sure we have enough time to see some of these rooms. And do you mind showing the slides?
What have you got first, Annie?
All right, so here we have some
Thank you,
upholstered
Rennie. Thank you,
walls.
Rennie. Thank you. Yes, this is a nice one for everybody. I mean, from what I've been saying, this is a house in London we did for, I mean, it was the most lovely project in the world because the young girl was, you know, in her late 20s that we did it for, and she was in the world of fashion and all sorts of things, and she really loved going for it. And it's such a treat when people suddenly they want color or they want pattern or they want different sorts of things, and this particular girl did. So what we did here, it's a wonderful linen that this printed cotton, actually. It's not linen, it's a printed cotton. And so we upholstered the walls, and then we made these lovely like Turkish seats. And this is a corner of a lovely television area at the end of a living room. And the thing about it is you just can't help but just be bowled over by the atmosphere. I mean, the ottoman itself is in a Moroccan fez weave. You know, it's got Moroccan lights that we make that our company also make in Morocco, the wall lights you'll see there. And then it's got this, I mean, you can imagine that's a particularly deep sofa. It's almost a meter deep, in fact, although it doesn't show there. So it's really for lounging on. And those big squishy cushions with the rope around them like a Turkish ottoman. I mean, look at that room. If you took off the middle painting, and you hadn't acquired it yet, you know, because it's worth a lot of money, isn't the room almost complete anyway? I mean, everything about it, the lights and the walls. So it's my point often about pattern, which is so brilliant. It's like talking about the Betty chintz we talked about in this room I've just done in it. The woman who has the room doesn't have any paintings. She just has lovely wall lights and very interesting works of art, but no paintings. Or she has one, I think. But so this is the same. This gives you all the atmosphere you want just through extraordinary decoration.
That's so smart.
But also it's smart too, Dara, because the walls and the sofas all blend into each other. It's just there. And then you've got great throws and great pillows and things in it, which give it another whole atmosphere. And that's easy to change.
Right. And
so you've got yellow and orange.
Right. It couldn't have been an easy feat to line up the fabric and the upholstery, right?
Well, that's also about, people would mention that you represent as well. That's what makes us good. You know, that's what that is all about. You know, I'm sorry, even from day one, you're thinking about how things are going to line up and is it going to work?
Right.
You know? So, and the whole sofa, it comes in bits. It's an enormous piece of furniture. And it obviously was, we had to, the upholsterer, the wall upholsterer and the upholsterer worked together on it. So we had the whole thing drawn up to make sure they did come, because it would drive me mad if they didn't all line up. Like, it would, your keen eye would probably go berserk if they didn't line up, and so did
That's your order. That's your order.
Well, maybe that's what it is, yes.
No, it should. Okay, tell us a little bit about this beautiful bedroom.
Well, I love this bedroom. This is, again, in the same house, in fact. And the walls are upholstered in a fabric of ours, it's called Veranda, and it's a linen that we print. And when you print linens, it smudges slightly. It's not like a woven linen. And I love it because it has very faint distressed thing, although looking at it now, it's just a lovely blue wall. So the walls are upholstered. Well, that is heaven for a start in a bedroom. And this is my homage to David Hicks, because David Hicks used this wonderful pendant pellet idea on the top of the bed. And I love curtains on four sides. And so, I mean, let me say this in the world. If someone said to you, I'm going to do a room for you that's pale blue and off-white, you know it's just going to be gorgeous. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, I can do an orange and purple room, which is fantastic. But if you say you're going to do off-white and blue and a blue carpet and everything's just blue and white, to sleep in, can it be anything else but the most gorgeous thing to wake up with?
Right. It's so dreamy.
But what is interesting, this is us, of course, I love doing this. If you've seen on the bed, there is a throw in the best cashmere that's bright yellow, a saffron yellow. So you have one saffron yellow throw, and you have an entire room that's just in shades of white and blue. So and it's sensational. It is so beautiful to sleep in, I suspect, Dara. I mean, you know, it's it can only do everything that a four-poster bed and an upholstered wall could ever do. You know, you could always feel cocooned and happy. And imagine in Manhattan, even, you know, if you had a modern apartment and you had a high ceiling and you had that, you know, it would, after, you know, the difficulties we all have of living in city lives and the stress we feel, if you had a massage room next to it, you couldn't really wish for anything more. Well, this is the massage room next door. This is the bed. This is the bathroom off it. So, and one of the things we love to do in our work, if we can, this doesn't really apply to children's bathrooms so much, but I adore a room that's wallpapered and curtained and chandeliered, that also happens to have a lavatory, a shower, a bar, a tub, and a washout basin.
Right.
I just think it's
like
the best luxury.
Room. It's a proper room. It's a
proper room. In other words, it's not a bathroom, it's a proper room. I mean, you'll see the lovely wooden floor, the polished wooden floor. I love wooden floors in bathrooms anyway. But just the detail I love is the tub sitting on a piece of marble. There's a huge shower behind the door here, which you can't see, that's lined in marble. And the lavatory's over in the other corner. And then in the window, we've put the most wonderful wash-hand basin. We have this lovely triptych mirror that sits there, and don't worry, the whole thing pulls out. So when the window cleaner comes, he can easily clean the window. So that's also about being highly practical. Mm-hmm. And what is also lovely about the triptych in the window, the curtains can close behind it. So on a winter's evening, and on your left, you can see a tiny bit of slate on the floor. There's a fireplace there. So on a winter's evening, you come in, there's a fire going, a gas log fire with real flames, and you have a bath, and you have the curtains drawn and a candle or whatever. Well, I mean, and then you've got that first, then you go to the bedroom next door. So what is there not to like?
Heavenly. And Sensual and Spare.
It's Sensual and Spare. It's ordered as well. I mean, you know, by the lavatory, there's a nice little table which has a candle and has some magazines on it. If you catch up with your reading or whatever, you can also reach it from the bath. But I do love also a wash hand basin sitting in a window, because with the triptych mirror like that, Dara, it gives you privacy as well, and you don't need a blind. So the girl whose house this is, she's always got privacy. And then at night, she just closes the curtains, which go behind this wash hand basin and the mirror.
So beautiful. So beautiful.
So really, and even the chandelier, you see, it's just a lovely image.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. And I mean, you want to really say to people too, of course it's luxurious. Of course it is all those things. But what we've devoted to it is giving you a room as opposed to a tiny space. Mm-hmm. So I maintain, have one less bedroom in your house and have a lovely big bathroom. Mm-hmm. Let the children have tiny bathrooms if you like. Now this is probably every young woman's dream in the whole world. The girls in my office almost weep when they see this photograph, because the whole room, ladies, is tinted. There's curtains over all the wardrobes on all four sides. So what's very good about it, which I love, I think if you're lucky enough to have a dressing room, if you have a full room as a dressing room as a woman, the best thing in the world, I'm sure, is to be able to see all of the clothes at once and then go round. Because one of the things, I'm different as a male, I don't have a lot of clothes. I have 5 or 6 suits and I have jackets and things, but I hate having clothes I don't wear. Now women aren't like that, they want lots of choice. So the great thing about this room, you open all the curtains and then you do your pattern or you choose what you want to wear. And then the great thing is you close the curtains, maybe only once a week. But when you close them, there's no dust that will settle on the clothes. There's no cupboard doors to open that you leave open. You just draw a string and the curtains close, like you close the windows. So it's very seductive. I mean, it's everything. You can be as messy as you like behind the curtains.
Yeah.
And
but
then,
so I love that it's neutral. It's like a canvas for your clothes. It's not too busy, so it doesn't compete with your clothes.
Well, that's also what's very important. I mean, Nina, the girl who has this house, she loved this pale green. It's never my color. Like Natasha, who works for me, adores pale green. Most women love green. For some reason, although I have a green living room at home, I'm contradicting myself. It's not my first place of reference. And if I had this room, if I was doing it myself, I probably, because this is a very nice fabric from Sister Parish, and I would have probably done it in the blue version.
Mm-hmm.
But the green version is actually very successful because it's somehow slightly more, well, it somehow fades away easier. I don't know what it is, because what people never always forget is a dressing room is full of color, because women have colorful clothes and shoes. So when all the curtains are open, there's a riot of color going on. And the last thing you want is your room to compete with that, because
Right.
your job in the dressing room is to choose what you're going to wear.
Right.
So, you know, so in other words, rather than beige or taupe, shall we say, it's a very, very pretty, it's the green of a lime leaf in the spring. It's that color of optimism and hope, you know. And so maybe when you wake up in the morning, you go to a dressing room like that, there's lots of hope. I don't know, but it's pretty good. And look at the shoes, you see. That's when you want a housekeeper, when every day they're put back like that.
Sure, for sure.
But it's but again, it's the luxury of it. And this here is a room in a house in London we did, which is very cool. One in London, the London houses, a bit like the houses maybe in Lower Manhattan and in Brooklyn as well, often have a basement floor. That's the floor under the ground floor. And often it goes out to the garden. So in the front, it's a little bit dark, but at the back, it goes onto a garden. And this is the back part. And the young couple loved, you know, American milk bars of the 50s. So we designed this banquette in red leather, which looks like something you get in a milk bar, you know, where you went and had a milkshake or something. And the walls
So
are done in
fun.
this wonderful, it's fun. It's a really fun. And of course, they've got young children. So the loveliest thing in the world is to have a leather banquette if you've got young children. I mean, they might put their fingers on their pillows, but the great thing about leather, it's indestructible on that way. And that's why we often use it on that sort of thing. The table's a modern Saarinen table, which is a great table. It's been a classic since 1926 or something. It still make it, still a classic. The chairs are French restaurant chairs, which I think are wonderful, and this amazing colors of wicker. And then there's French windows there that go into a beautiful garden. So there's another part of this room, which I think we're going to see now, but this is the dining part of it. And the walls are shiny lacquer, and that's the other side of it. Mm-hmm. So that's where the telly is and where they hang out. And you have these lovely pops of red against the green. And then the curtains are that amazing sort of printed linen of green and red. You know, it's sort of, but it doesn't look like a Christmas tree. It, again, there's an order to it, I suppose, Dara, we have to admit, you know, like, just what's interesting is look at the sofa. The painting is dead center of the sofa. When it came to hanging the painting, it was a nightmare because, in fact, because of the paneling, the sofa doesn't sit directly in front of the paneling. So you put the painting off center of the panel, but because it's all painted the same color, you don't register it. Your eye goes to the center of the sofa.
Right.
And that's maybe where the order comes again, Dara.
That's fascinating.
You know, okay. So in fact, the fact that the panel doesn't have a painting in the middle, it's important that it's dead center of the sofa. You know, when I first came across the problem, I thought I'd need lots of paintings, but that's how we solved it. This here is what we'd all love in the whole world. It's an English country Queen Anne house, the most beautiful house in the world, in the most beautiful park with 3,000 acres, and you know, it's just beyond bliss. And the couple are young, with lovely young children, and he's also got children from before who are young men now. And the girl's family have a very famous stately home in England, where she was brought up. And lovely parents who are my age and who are friends of mine, and it's a wonderful, very famous house in Suffolk. And she and her husband wanted something in the English classical mode, but a bit modern. You know, they just didn't want it necessarily as her parents and grandparents had had. So we have the best English sofas, which are so deep you get swallowed up in them, and with big feather cushions and pillows all over them. The ottoman is silk velvet, which is a bit of a nightmare. I'm sorry, it's your silk velvet, Dara. I'm terribly sorry, but we had to replace it twice, so you won't mind. Because silk velvet, you know, isn't. Anyway, they love it. They just keep replacing it, which I would too. The mirror is a wonderful 18th century mirror, which we then had gessoed, which is in white paint, and the lovely sort of slightly Giacometti-esque ceiling light. The curtains are off-white. The walls don't show here, but they're pale blue linen, upholstered. And the curtains are off-white and they're trimmed in pale blue.
Beautiful.
And then the stools are, I make myself in Morocco. They're the stools of they're called a thieves stool, and they're made in the late 19th century, 20th century, when they discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. So they've got the Egyptian feeling about them. And then the lovely Moroccan rug the whole thing sits on.
It's so
So
beautiful.
it's the best English country house room, but it's got a contemporary feeling. I mean, the house, that room also, Dara, could be in the Hamptons, couldn't it? You could also do it in America. It'd be in America so easy too. The fireplace looks old, but it's a new one made by Jam, which are brilliant. So it looks 18th century. But you know, it's got a contemporary feeling about it.
So beautiful.
And yet it's serene. Now, here's a famous nook niche bed. This is in the same house. This is in his dressing room. And I can't tell you everybody we ever show this bed to. And what's interesting, I see continually put up on Instagram by various designers saying it's one of the details they love. And it's the inside of it is upholstered in something called Folly, which is a wonderful shoemaker fabric which we produce. And the outside is in a cashmere, a lovely blue cashmere, the dark blue. And well, it's as good as you get. I mean, and behind you, you've got bookcases one end, bookcases the other. And there's a little television, I think, at the far end, because you can watch his screen at night and see what New York share prices are like when it closes or something ridiculous, but that's what he does, you know. So, but it's the most wonderful little space which he owns, which has got his name on it, and it's his sacred space, and it's in his sacred dressing room. His wife's got the most lovely dressing room as well, but this is his area. You know, and then they have a lovely big bathroom between the two dressing rooms. But you see, you could do that for your son and daughter, couldn't you? You could do that too, Dara. It doesn't have to just be for a middle-aged man. And this is what I say to everybody. If you've got a dark, cold, north-facing room and you want to make it happy and it's used by guests, do it yellow. You know, you've got Belvedere fabric wallpaper on the wall that from Shoemaker, and on the bed. The throws are yellow cashmere. The curtains are a yellow linen of ours as well, called Veranda. It's just such a happy room, and it looks quite bright because of the photograph, but it looks onto a lot of trees, so it's a very dark room, and it faces north as well. And on the left here, there's a lovely open fire. And with the armchair as well, if you're a guest in winter and you came into that with a fire going and at night with the curtains drawn, I think it's pretty good.
It's gorgeous.
You know,
I get tired of looking at it work. So beautiful.
And very simple beds, Dara. They're incredibly simple. They're just nice iron beds, which we extended. We put a canopy around the back, and because they didn't want too much fabric, we just have the Belvedere fabric sitting on the back of the bed, the fabric that matches. It's on the bed valance as well as the walls, you know. So it's what we do with you is always doing matching fabrics and wallpapers, which is something we used to do with David Hicks in the 80s, and I love it. I think it's such a great combo, doing wallpapers and fabrics together.
Well, it's such an easy way to tie a room together, right?
Yeah, and also as a decorator, for young decorators, it's maximum impact. Right. You know, it's really great. I think it's brilliant. But that room is highly successful. You see, it has a contemporariness, but look at the furniture. It's got a 17th century chest of drawers. It's got a lovely 19th century chair. It's got nice watercolor pictures, and it's got modern porcelain in it. So it's not like it's traditional, but it doesn't look stuffy. It looks young and vibrant.
Yes, for sure. But I think that's about as much as what you don't put in as what you do put in. You know?
Well, isn't that the great thing about editing? You as a magazine editor once too knows, you know, so often. And it's like really, if a client says to me they like a simple room and they don't want too much furniture, and because their art is important. I think what's really important, you design the room not to need it. It's not just like you forget to put a chair here or a piece of furniture there. You design it in the balance and order that we've talked about. by which the paintings come to the fore, or it never needs anything more than the way you finish it. And that's very important consideration, because so many people think that a minimalist house that's architecturally superb, that has very little in it, means you forget to fill it. It's not that. You design it not to need anything. And that's a very important point. And you see it in that room too. Because remember, when you have a guest room, if you're lucky enough to have a few multiple homes, or even for yourself if you have a guest room, it's often difficult to make it cozy because there's no one in it. And it's like dining rooms that aren't used. They're not rooms you want to be in, because we need the human spirit to invade rooms. So your rooms that you live in have your spirit in them. But if it's a room that's only used maybe, not that often, you have to really try and give it an extra injection like this room has. And it might only be, if you think about it, it might only be used maybe a dozen times a year. And but you want to still make it when your guests arrive that it's as wonderful as any room that's being used every day of the year.
Right, but that's so thoughtful. I mean, you really thought of everything. I mean, you thought of the north-facing room, the fact that it was dark. I mean, you really, I think that's so inspiring how you think about it.
Yes, I suppose it is inspiring, but it's also, what's so lovely about decorating is you learn all those things as well. You learn the way human beings react to things.
Right.
That's what's so great about our job. It's not just using pretty fabrics.
Well, that was one question I wanted to ask, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. So it sounds like, you really do respond to what your clients want, right? I mean, you have the one client who wanted it to feel like an English country house, but be more contemporary. And so where do you start? I mean, you obviously interview your clients, and then like when you're doing a room, where does the idea come from?
The most difficult thing, I remember, years and years and years ago, Vogue magazine in London, when I just started, said, would you do a room set? And back in the 80s, they used to do a room set, a modern room set. And I said, well, how should it be? And they said, just do it. I said, no, you must tell me something. I can't do it unless you tell me. So the editor said, make it shocking pink. Well, I did a shocking pink room, which I've still got photographs of, which was brilliant for its day. It was really brilliant. It was, I think this was about 1984. And so you have to begin with the person. Now, what's interesting, Dara, a lot of people in my business, we talk about Martin and Mary and Timothy and all those people that you also work with. We also experience often now we asked to do commercial work. And with commercial work, I mean hotels. And I stayed in a hotel the other day last year in Santa Barbara that Martin had done, which was it's called the Hotel California, and it was like a Moroccan hotel. And so if you're doing commercial work, who's your client? What do they want? They want atmosphere. So you have to behave like I did in the room I just showed you that was yellow. You have to think of someone arriving and what would be actually, would you complete it completely so they're going to feel at home? So that's what you have to do commercially. But for domestic work, which we mainly do, you have to have a pointer. I have to have a pointer. And so your pointer could be, Veere, I hate pink, or I hate yellow, or hate something is as good as loving something. And that's just the tiniest thing. And what we often do, I've noticed Natasha, and what this is interesting about young people too, because they're so brilliant at editing on a computer, I can't do any of that. I mean, I'm just not interested. And you're used to doing that on a screen, probably from your editorship, is we put together with the client when we first meet them, and we both like each other and we think we can help, some sort of lookbook of ideas from conversations with them. And it can be very random. It's almost like a Pinterest, but it's a lookbook. And we can do it from the sort of door handles we'd like to use, to the light switches we want to use, to the sort of colors we'd like, or the atmosphere we'd like. And that is so successful. it's so successful because it allows people to say, yes, I love to live like that. And we make it original. It's not just pulling it out of a magazine. It's the whole screen or the whole lookbook is covered in different ideas. But what happens is when you do a house is Natasha and I and the assistant would say, oh, we're now got this lovely job in America. We're going to work for Dara Caponigro. She's an editor. She's the creative director, shoemaker, and her husband's a publisher, and they've got 2 children, and they've got a lovely house, and we'd have a story about you all, shall we say. And then we'd say, what are we trying to achieve here? What is the look? And that's why as a company, we're quite unique, because although you will see a pattern throughout my work, every job is different. I do a bamboo house in Mustique, and I do an English country house, and then I'm doing a flat in New York, and I'm doing a house in Hamptons, and I'm building a house in Arkansas, and So and they're all different because all the clients are different, and their needs are different, and they're different people.
Right. You could be an anthropologist or a psychologist, or
Exactly.
you have real humanity to your work.
Well, you do. I mean, it's much easier if I just did the same thing all the time, Dara. I could actually go off and retire and just get them to churn it out. But it doesn't work like that. To be creative, as you know, and you as a creative director, shoemaker, you're continually pushing the envelope. You're continually being inspired, and you're continually trying to make it more interesting, or better, or easier.
Fun, right? All right. There are a couple of questions from the audience. Let me quickly ask those. So in the living room, you know that where the 2 sofas are flanking the fireplace. What era are the upholstered pieces by the fireplace?
I think by the fireplace is a pair of tables, in fact, and then there's 2 lamps, and then also there is 2 stools in the front. But
the sofas, are those your own design, or those?
Yes, they are. Right, so I'm so sorry. Yes, they're our own design, and we call them our country house sofa. And it's the big beasts, I can tell you, but they've got big, thick backs, and they're very well sprung. And you only really use them when there's a big space. We make our sofas as comfortable, even if they're not as deep. But this has, the pleasure in the country if something that looks extra deep, looks extra cozy. It's like the television room I showed you with those lovely Turkish cushions. So if your person answering the questions, now a design we do, it has a low arm, which is comfortable, and the back section is divided. So it's got 3, the back is all upholstered, and then it's got the seats, then it has pillows. I dislike intensely sofas or couches, whatever you want to call them, that have a seat cushion and a back cushion and pillows. Now that's when you get disorder. That's when there's too much bloody stuff going on. What you want, if the back is upholstered, then you have pillows. So when you get into the sofa, you put the pillow behind you, and that's great. And the pillows can be different colors. And when you're doing a room, to save the pop you need to make it work, it's usually the pillows we do at the end. So when we move a client in, we usually say there's probably another month to go before it's finished because we're going to make pillows now. Because then you add what you need. It can be a bit of yellow, or it can be a color, or it can be no color, or it can be the same. It can be antique fabric.
Right.
Makes it unique.
Well, I've learned so much from you today. Thank you so much. I feel so lucky, as I'm sure the entire audience does. Thanks for being so generous with your knowledge and sharing your beautiful projects. And Veere, you're the best. I so appreciate it.
Well, it's a great honor, and thank you, Dara. I really enjoyed it. I'm sorry if I rabbited on a bit, but I mean...
No, it was fabulous. One of the things I loved is that you said what you hate. So many designers or editors, you learn as much from what people dislike as what they dislike. And I think it's so important.
I think it's really important. And there's a place for everything. And even the things in my book I wrote, because they couldn't wait to hear the things I dislike. I mean, I intensely dislike curtains that are short, but there's a place for them. I've just done them in a cottage. There's a place for everything. I dislike fireplaces and big alcoves with bits of brass on them. I was brought up with them, but there's a place for it. So there's a place for every one of us, whatever. There's always an answer.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Bless you. So nice to see you. So nice to see you. And to you, lots of love to you, Dara. Thanks awfully. Bye.